welcome. Thank you for joining us here today. My name's Kent Weir. I'm a Principal PM Manager on the Azure Logic Apps team, and I'm joined by...
I'm Divya Swankar. I'm a Product Manager in Logic Apps team as well.
And today we're going to be talking about modernizing integration with Azure Integration Services. So from an agenda perspective, we're going to kind of be talking about three main things. Three things I love to talk about: Logic Apps, AI, and coffee. And I also like to talk about football and golf, but we'll save that for the attendee party tonight. So Azure Integration Services is a modern iPaaS. And so if you think about what that generally means, what customers are looking for from a modern iPaaS, it usually includes these characteristics. So I think number one, it starts with your developer bench and making this platform available to a broad audience, including your integration specialists, your automation specialists, software developers, IT operations, and then also there's the business technologists that are impacted by these solutions. They're looking for an outcome based upon the solution that's being built. Now, what's key to making these iPaaS platforms work is enterprise orchestration. So if you think about the tasks that you would typically solve through orchestration, that could include data integration and system integration, business process automation, B2B and EDI, connectivity and integration. More and more, we're learning about agents this week, the ability to orchestrate agents, and then even your custom code workloads as well. Now, other capabilities that you would expect to find include API management and API governance. We also have connectivity through out-of-box connectors. We have eventing and messaging. And naturally, these need to connect to a wide variety of different infrastructure and platforms. So whether it's on-premises, third-party public clouds, Azure public cloud, SaaS-based providers, or even legacy software, these are all expectations. Now, from an Azure Integration Services perspective, we do offer a portfolio of services that allows you to go ahead and accomplish and achieve these goals. And you can see the various services that we have here on the slide today. Now, underpinning all of these capabilities are the things that you would come to expect and things that are available in the Azure platform itself. So this includes governance, security, and scalability. Those are table stakes that you need inside of your iPaaS. Now, in terms of how do we go ahead and accelerate time to market, time to value, that's where we've made some recent investments in templates, and we're going to see that here today. We also have GenAI-infused experiences to lower the barrier of entry and allow you to go ahead and build these applications quickly and to expand that developer bench that we mentioned before. And naturally, you need to be able to go ahead and deploy these assets, these solutions, using a reliable and consistent manner through Azure DevOps. Now, something that is fairly new, we just introduced this October, and that's the new Logic App Standard hybrid deployment model. And this is just giving you more optionality when it comes to where you want to run your integration workloads. So what this allows you to do is to run Logic App Standard on customer-managed infrastructure. So that includes on-premises, in a managed service like a private cloud, or even other third-party public clouds. Now, the architecture that we're targeting is semi-connected by nature. So what this means is that your workloads, your workflows run locally on your compute. All of your audit trails, your run history, that is persisted locally in local storage, in this case, SQL Server. And naturally, by deploying these in your infrastructure, you also have local network access. And so this really gives you more control over your workloads and where they actually go ahead and run. Now, when we say the word semi-connected, it's there on purpose. That means there's going to be some things that need connection or connectivity. And that is really the Azure portal. That remains your management experience. And through Azure Arc, you're able to go ahead and access these resources through the public cloud, through the Azure portal. Now, the benefit for you as a customer is that you can now go ahead and deploy these workloads in a variety of different locations, but still have the same management and development tools in order to go ahead and build those out. Now, what we've also announced, because this question always comes up, so I just like to preempt it, is we do have a billing model that is available. This is currently in public preview, and this is something that we'll be looking to take to GA sometime in the near future. Now, the customer journey that we like to talk through for hybrid is that the way you build these solutions is exactly the same. You're in VS Code, you're in the Azure portal, choice is up to you. You then go ahead and store your code and configuration inside of some source control repository like ADO or GitHub. And then it really becomes a decision around where do you want to go ahead and host these particular runtimes. Naturally, we love having these hosted in our Azure cloud as workflow service plans or ACE v3. But you can now go ahead and run these on Arc-enabled Kubernetes clusters in the data center of your choice. But regardless of where you choose to deploy these workloads, you still have a unified management and monitoring experience. So this is something that we're not going to have a ton of time to get into more details here, but would encourage you to check out our blog post. We've got a demo. All of our docs are up to date as well. And I would encourage you to feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions on these offerings. I'll let people take a few more pictures, and then I'll move ahead. All right, so let's talk a little bit about why AI and integration. So if you think about the opportunities that Microsoft sees when it comes to generative AI, it typically falls into the following 4 categories. Increasing employee productivity and well-being, and certainly we've seen that with Copilot and all of the investments made in that technology. On the far end of the spectrum, we also have bending the curve of innovation. So obviously there's a lot of things going on these days with self-driving cars. No, we don't expect Logic Apps to be doing that anytime soon. But the 2 areas where we do feel that we have something to offer is reshaping every business process and also reinventing customer experiences. Now, we're going to talk about these 2 pillars through demos throughout the course of this particular session. Now, what we have here is Fourth Coffee. It's a Microsoft fictitious company, kind of like Contoso. And we've got a series of demos. We're only going to be able to show you 2 today, but we have others in our blogs and online videos. But hopefully, some of these use cases will resonate with you. So if you think about suppliers, and if you're a coffee company, you're naturally going to be dealing with suppliers from an inventory perspective. You receive inventory, you're expected to pay for that. So how do you go ahead and process invoices, especially if they're coming in through PDF documents? We can go ahead and use Logic Apps to go ahead and scrape these PDFs using the Form Recognizer connector and then be able to populate downstream systems using that data. So that's an opportunity to leverage AI from that perspective. We can also go ahead and expose conversational experiences through our friends on the Azure OpenAI team and being able to go ahead and create assistants, which are now branded as agents, and be able to leverage Logic Apps from a plugin perspective. Now, the next use case, and this is one that we are going to demonstrate, is in the area of order processing. So you can imagine an e-commerce platform where we're going to receive orders, and we'd like to be able to upsell customers on other products that they might actually enjoy based on their previous purchasing history. So that's a situation where Logic Apps can go ahead and tap into a large language model in order to obtain and provide those recommendations. Naturally, as we're ingesting sales data, we naturally can use that from an operations perspective as well and provide insights to our operations team by being able to reason and retrieve this particular data. And then last, and this is another demo we're going to show today, is around product returns and how we can automate product returns using generative AI while still having a human in the loop to provide some guardrails as well.
So when it comes to Logic Apps, business outcomes and developer productivity had always been the core principles of our platform. And this has become even more important as we bring in AI capabilities to our integration platform. And this is because when it comes to business outcomes and when it comes to you using AI capabilities, it's all about taking advantage of your existing business processes and enhancing them and reinventing those customer experiences, as well as re-enhancing those business processes with the use of AI. And so I'm going right to left on this slide. So as an example of how you can do this is through AI agents. An AI agent essentially responds to a series of events, And given an objective and a set of instructions, it can take a series of actions based on that. For AI agents, you also need to have access to AI models, and this is where Logic Apps offers first-party integration with Azure OpenAI models through OpenAI connector, as well as to third-party AI models through API management. Now here you have an AI agent who has access to LLM, and in many cases this is sufficient, but in many cases where you want to have personalized agents who are grounded and contextualized on your business data, you need to provide that context to them, which can be coming in from several data sources. And this is another area where Logic Apps shines with its hundreds of out-of-box connectors, which you can use to augment these AI agents with your business data. So how do you do that? And that's where a lot of AI building blocks comes into play, which are being offered with our integration platform. And this is really important because when it comes to Logic Apps, these are available as out-of-box connectors. And what this means is that it provides you a complete abstraction into the underlying AI stack. So you do not have to spend a lot of time learning, and especially in the case of AI where there is rapid innovation happening at an unprecedented space. So there is a constant relearning loop that you need to be in, and that we take care of by providing you these capabilities abstracted to the level where you can use them, and still we provide all the configuration power to you so that you still have control in terms of how you customize these out-of-box connectors for your specific business needs. So the idea here is that you don't have to be a domain expertise in the entire stack. You continue to focus on your business outcomes and your business processes, whereas we take care of the underlying implementation here. So the Azure OpenAI connector here provides you access to hundreds of LLM models that OpenAI offers, and you can use them to generate embeddings, as well as you can chat with your data using multimodal models and generate chat completions for your AI applications. In order to build contextualized applications, you need to have vector stores where you can store your business data. And that's where our connectors to different vector stores come into play, where we do have connectors like Azure AI Search, SQL, and Cosmos DB, which you can use to index your documents and store these documents as vectors into these vector stores so that they are available for efficient search and retrieval at scale. And finally, as you are processing different types of documents and data, they do not just contain text. They often contain complex images, objects such as tables, charts, and that's where Document Intelligence Connector comes into play, where you can extract text from these complex documents using our out-of-box connectors. So with these building blocks, we believe that you can leverage these to build common AI patterns and bring them into your AI applications. And one of this common pattern is document indexing. Like I was mentioning before, if you want to build AI agents that are grounded and contextualized with your business data, you need to index them, you need to store them into vector store. And this requires a couple of steps, and the first one here is that you need to load data, and your data can be residing or coming in from different type of data sources. These data sources can be in cloud, can be behind a VNet, can be on-prem, and Logic Apps with its library of connectors provide you the capability to read this data wherever it is. The data that you're reading can be in different types of formats, and with the building blocks that we are providing you, we can process data, whether it's structured or unstructured, and in hundreds of different formats. What this allows you is that you can build this pipeline and come to the next step, which is here splitting of the documents. And that's where, when you have large documents, you need to tokenize and split them into manageable sizes so that your vector stores can store them for efficient retrieval. So the process of splitting allows you to do that again out of box in Logic Apps. Next, you have these chunks of documents which need to be converted into vector embeddings. And using Azure OpenAI connector, you can use out-of-box actions to convert these documents into vector impressions. And the final step is to store these vector embeddings into the vector stores. And that's where Logic Apps again provides out-of-box connectors to store this data into vector stores and then use them for efficient search and retrieval as you build AI agents around them. Now, when it comes to retrieval of the data or when it comes to building AI applications, typically AI agents take in a question, and this question can come in from a conversational agent via a human or an AI agent which can be triggered by another business process. Regardless of the source of the question, the AI agent needs to provide needs a prompt, and that prompt usually includes the question from the user or the business process as well as additional context. If you're building personalized agent, that additional context comes in from your vector stores, which is what we are showing as a second step here. After building this additional context, you provide this prompt, and this prompt is then used by Azure OpenAI connector, which has access to hundreds of models to then generate a response that is grounded and personalized in your business data that then you can be used as is or can be further passed on to another agent to do more downstream processing for it. So while I pass on to Ken to show you all this stuff in action, the key point here is that we want you to focus on your business processes, business outcomes, whereas we want to provide these building blocks so that it's very easy to infuse AI into those existing business processes.
All right, thank you, Divya. So let's outline the scenario here a little bit. Now we've got, as we mentioned, order processing. So we're an e-commerce company, Fourth Coffee. We've got a website, and we're going to take these B2C orders in. We're then going to use Logic Apps to basically orchestrate a business process. Now, there's a few things that typically occur when we have a business process like this. One might be a discount, right? Are they part of our loyalty program? What is their entitlement around a discount? And we can actually go ahead and orchestrate that particular process. Now, we also have this recommendation engine LLM piece here, and that is a byproduct of us ingesting order data as we process it, then being able to subsequently use that order data on future events. And so what's interesting about this is that if you sort of rewind a year ago, maybe we weren't talking so much about LLMs, but you still had this order process. We haven't had to go ahead and rebuild this application. We haven't had to start from scratch in order to infuse it with AI. We're able to actually create these on-ramps and off-ramps that allow us to inject this capability. So if there's something I would encourage everyone today to take with you is think about existing business processes where you've already integrated these systems, but how can you actually infuse AI to generate some additional opportunities for you? And that's what we're doing here with the recommendation engine. And then we've also got like these other pieces here where we're going to use Dataverse as our ERP, and we're going to go ahead and update tables and records from that perspective. And naturally, we have a customer that we're going to interact with as well. All right, so what you see on screen is our favorite REST client, Postman. And this represents an order that would be sent from the e-commerce platform. So we've got header information, and then we've got 3 line items. We're looking to buy some light roast coffee, some morning blend, and some medium blend coffee. So we're going to go ahead and send this over to Logic Apps, and we're just going to get an acknowledgement back saying we've received your order, and it's being processed. Look for some updates over email. Now, this is the Logic app, the entry point for that particular interface. Here we're going to go ahead and call the discount calculation service that's fronted by Azure API Management. We're going to interact with our database. We're going to construct a canonical message, and then we're going to put that on a service bus queue. So this is that on-ramp I was just talking about, right? So we're now going to complement this process by creating another workflow that's going to pull that message from the service bus queue. We're going to go ahead and do some document preparation that Divya just talked about when we think about ingestion. We're going to create some embeddings, and then we're going to index that content, in this case, that message. And at this point, that will now be available for us to subsequently query later in the process itself. Now, this is what the customer is going to see. Here's an order summary. We've received your order. Here's basically what you order, the price is. But then below, what we have is these product recommendations. And so now what we've done is we've got the recommendations from the LLM. We've reached into our product catalog. We've retrieved the prices and some images so that we can actually now present that to the customer itself. Now, the customer then will have the opportunity to take the upsell or decline it. The demo works better if they take it, so we're going to go ahead and accept the upsell from that perspective. So shortly, we'll see another email that will arrive that's just going to say, yep, we've sort of received your order. It's now been shipped. Here is your tracking number that you can use to go ahead and follow your particular order. So the question is, how did we go ahead and generate those recommendations? So we've got a workflow here. It's our fulfill order workflow. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to, once again, call an API. Now, behind this API is a Logic App workflow. And this workflow is going to implement that retrieval pattern that Divya just talked about. And so we're going to receive this request. And this is going to include the order data that we previously had captured. We're going to then create an embedding. And we're going to search for vectors and then also generate some chat completions. So this is that prompt that Divya was talking about. It's a system prompt, and it's based upon the GPT-4o model. And we're giving the AI assistant some instructions on, you are an AI assistant that's good at recommending coffee based upon historical sales data. We want you to generate at most 3 recommendations based upon the customer's preferences, which was their order data. And when you go ahead and do so, return a JSON structure that includes a list of products where the list is called product recommendations. So probably in a lot of demos this past week, you've always seen a user being on the other end of a prompt and getting the response. Well, here what we're talking about is systems. So we've got a system that's going to be able to listen for the response and then be able to go provide some specific actions. Now, in this case, what we're going to do is just some enrichment. We're going to create an email with some formatted HTML. We're going to go get those product images that I talked about before and then present that to the customer through the send email with options. Based upon what they choose, we'll naturally go ahead and either update the order to say, yes, include the recommendations. If they choose to decline it, naturally that gives us an opportunity to do some additional analysis and be able to say, hey, are these recommendations any good? Or what's sort of landing, what isn't landing. But it allows us to then refine our model and go back and find out what might be working.
All right, so let's take a look at the product return use case now. So in this case, this is a business process that Fourth Coffee had. Prior to infusing AI agent, the human agent had to take care of 100% of the returns. Now let's see how we can bring in AI agent to optimize this process. And that's the idea here, that how AI and human expertise can come together to streamline business process, in this case the refund process, and provide customers also with an enhanced experience. So in this demo, the product return is initiated by the customer, who is the Fourth Coffee supplier, and they request a refund. And in that request, they provide the image of the product as well as the reason they want to request for the return. The Logic App listens to this email, and then after it receives the request, it also queries the ERP system here, which is Dataverse in this case, to get the customer's return history. And the customer's return history along with the return request is then provided to the LLM to get a recommendation whether the return should be accepted or not. And the way for the LLM, we also have to provide its goal and the set of instructions along with the guardrails so that the AI knows exactly its boundaries on what to respond and under what conditions to respond. These guardrails basically make sure that the AI operates within a certain boundaries, and as you build more confidence in your AI agent process, you can then delegate more to the AI agent. So in this case, the AI will take action in case of low risk cases. For example, the orders are of certain value, or if the customer return history is good. And for cases where a human intervention is needed, then it's being escalated to a human agent here, who then looks at the request and then does the approval or rejection based on the request. So let's take a look at the demo. So in this case, this is the logic app which is going to receive the email from the customer when they want to make a request for the return. The subsequent steps in this workflow are extracting the information that the customer provided, especially the image, and that gets uploaded for further processing. We then called a nested workflow here, which is where most of the processing will happen. To this nested workflow, we are able to pass on all the relevant information such as the product image, email, other details from the customer. We also want to pull in the customer's return history, and that's where we invoke another nested workflow which uses an action to call Dataverse and pulls in the records from return table based on the email of the customer. Now that we have all the information from the customer as well as the customer's return history, we are able to invoke the LLM. And here we are using a vision model because we want to analyze the images that the customer has provided. Along with the image model and everything, here comes the system prompt, and this is where we can define how our agent is going to behave. So the first step here is to define what the goal of the agent is, which is to determine if a return should be accepted or not. Along with that, we are also giving the company policies on how it makes that determination whether a return is in acceptable state or not. We also provide the product image that the customer shared with us, as well as the customer's return history to the LLM here. Now these are all the things that LLM should do. What are the things LLM should not do? And that's where these are the guardrails where we instruct the LLM that in these cases where the return history is, in this example, beyond 4 times in 6 months, it needs to loop in a human agent, and that's where it's going to send a note to the human agent to take further action. Now here the output of this step is a recommendation from the AI agent, which can be quite verbose. So we are again using in a way another AI agent whose job is to summarize what is given to it and return a Boolean value. Once we have that Boolean value, then the true path is what the AI agent's path is, where the return can be accepted without anything else, and the false path is where we need to loop in the human agent, and that's where we are using Teams connector here to send a notification to the human agent to look at that return request and either approve or reject it. Based on whatever the action they take, we then inform the customer of the status of the return request. So let's take a look at some of the examples and see how the workflow that I showed you would just work. So this is an example where Contoso Goods want to make this return request, and these are coffee beans, but the product is exposed, the packaging is bad, so the return should be accepted. Let's see if the return gets accepted or not. So this request will now go to the Logic App workflow that we were just showing you. And here, this is the inbox of Contoso, the supplier, and they have received the response right away. So that tells me that this was processed by the AI agent. And here is the workflow run that processed this request. As you can see, it went on the true path, which was when the request can be processed by AI agent. And here is the LLM processing of that request, where it recommends that the return should be accepted because the packaging was torn and the beans were exposed. It also looked at the return history and noted that the customer doesn't have any return history, so it approved that automatically. Now let's take a look at another request where the same supplier now is sending this image which doesn't look like coffee beans to me. So let's see how this gets processed. When this request is being sent, this is the same workflow. Now as you can see, this is on the false path and it's actually in a waiting state because the request has now been sent to the human agent. Since in my case, I'm only using AI agent to approve the requests. When it's a rejection, human agent is involved. So in this case, the human agent has received this request over a Teams channel. And as you can see, the human agent already has all the analysis that AI agent did here. So they are not starting from scratch. They have the recommendation from the AI agent here, a summary of why the AI agent is giving that recommendation, along with order details, the image of the product that the customer shared. So it's a much faster process for human agent also to act on this request. And here the agent has decided to reject it. Now let's take a look at a third example. And in this case, we are making a similar request, but the supplier is different this time. And let's see if this will be approved by the agent or not. So unlike before where agent approved it, this one is not approved by the AI agent automatically. And the reason is also listed here, that while the packaging is torn, it's a valid reason for return, the customer had a frequent return history, so they want the human agent to review this instead of them approving it automatically. So this is the power of AI here, where you can define how the guardrails under which it does things automatically and loops in a human. And then as a human, you can take into consideration other factors and make that decision. So in this case, I think the human might decide to approve this request because maybe there were some logistics issues which triggered a bunch of these returns in the past. You can always start with AI slowly and bring in AI slowly into your business processes. And then as you get more comfortable, as you build more confidence, then you can go further. But in order to do that, you need to have a way to know how successful is your AI and what value it brings to your business overall. And that's where I'll ask Ken to share with you.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about measuring Gen AI automation. So what Divya was discussing there is really important, and I think it aligns with a lot of customer concerns around AI. How do I know what AI is doing? How do I know that AI is actually generating a business outcome? Because we're not doing AI for the sake of AI. And so it reminds me a little bit of this quote by Peter Drucker, who's sort of a pretty famous business economist. And it goes, you can't manage what you don't measure. And I think this is pretty critical if you think about AI, especially as we're at the dawn of AI, right? It's still a pretty new technology. Customers are still learning about it. We as Microsoft, we're still learning about it. And how do you put in those guardrails so that you know that it's doing what it's supposed to do? And so how can we go ahead and share the outcomes of AI? And how can we go ahead and share that with stakeholders, especially on the business side? What Divya showed you previously was the run history, which is a great sort of follow the breadcrumbs approach, but that's a technical tool. That isn't something that you're going to show to a business process owner saying, oh, just use this tool to see what the AI has done. And this is where we can go ahead and expose this data to business stakeholders. And we can also go ahead and enrich this data set to show measures and KPIs around the effectiveness of the AI that we've gone ahead and built. And what this really comes down to is business process tracking. So this is a service or a resource that is inside of Azure. It's owned by the Azure Logic Apps team. And what we've done with this particular offering is allow you to go ahead and expose key business data to business stakeholders across an entire business process. Regardless of how many workflows are in the mix, how many logic apps are in the mix, you can go ahead and build and expose this data to your stakeholders. So let's go ahead and we'll see a demo of this in action here. Okay, so this is the Azure portal. and I've gone ahead and created a business process. Now, this might look a little bit like Visio, and that's probably a good thing. We want to make sure that this is very approachable for customers. And we envision like an architect or a business analyst being able to go ahead and construct the business process, because quite frankly, they're going to be in the best position to go ahead and define that business process. So this is the business process that Divya was describing. We're going to receive an email. We do go ahead and archive that image for historical purposes. We're going to go ahead and retrieve the customer return history by querying Dataverse. We're going to get an AI recommendation, and based upon that recommendation, we're either going to engage a human and put a human in the loop, or we're going to go ahead and automatically go ahead and approve that return. Now, building what we call stages here is quite easy. You just go ahead and click on this plus sign, and then you can go ahead and add a stage or even a parallel stage, which we can see below here. Now, for each stage, we can go ahead and define different properties that we would want to go ahead and collect. So in this case, we're just capturing the order ID, but we could go ahead and capture product information, who is requesting the return, things of that nature. And then what we go ahead and do is we go ahead and map it to a particular logic app and subsequent workflow. So that's what I'm doing here. I've got a logic app defined. I've got a particular workflow. And then what I can go ahead and do is click on this select data sources. And what we go ahead and do is display a read-only version of that particular logic app. And then what we can go ahead and do is use the token picker to either go ahead and grab data from previous steps. We can also go ahead and use the expression editor as well if we need to do some sort of transformation, manipulation, etc. And so that's how we would go ahead and wire up all of these different stages to their respective workflows, and then we would deploy it. So the goal here is that you don't actually have to touch your workflows, your logic apps. Ideally, you're doing this over top, and you're not disrupting that flow whatsoever. So we go ahead and we deploy this, and then for any subsequent transactions, or in this case, product returns, we're going to see a new entry in this transactions view here. So if we take a look at a few of these, let's start with the top one. And this is going to be a result of AI automatically processing this return. Right, so we can see we received this email, we can see the order ID, and then if we skip down to the AI response, we can go ahead and see for that particular product return exactly what the AI recommendation was. So we now have traceability around what AI is doing. So if there's any ever doubts, we can go ahead and easily see this, and it doesn't have to be a technical audience in order to go ahead and look at this. Now, what we can also do is click on this Open Workflow Run, and this will take us to that run history view. So if you did want to go deeper into the technical details, you have a launch point from that perspective. So that's an example of the AI happy path. Let's take a look at another order. Now in this case, we can see that the AI recommendation suggested engaging a human. And in this case, we engaged the human, put them in the loop. They went ahead and approved this order, and then we did process the return. Now, the other scenario that Divya did show, though, was what happens when they do reject it. And so this is an opportunity where we can also show kind of the red light, green light show, where we can say, hey, this would represent, say, a business process error. Like there's something going on here that requires some additional investigation. So we can now model this, and this is something you as a customer controls by being able to create these success conditions or failure conditions and then be able to go ahead and share it. So this is one aspect of traceability, but I think there's another opportunity here. So when you get the question of how well is your AI performing and what's the return on investment for doing this, what's your answer? And so what we can do, all of this data is living in Azure Data Explorer, ADX. This is something that a customer sort of brings their ADX instance, provides a connection string, and at runtime we will emit this data to that data store. Because it's your data store, you can now build on top of that as well. And so what I've done here is I've just created a Power BI dashboard that I go ahead and I consume from ADX. I don't claim to be a Power BI expert. I love the tool. I just don't get enough time to spend within it. But what we can see here is that we've had 34 product returns. 10 of them have been approved by AI. 24 of them have been managed by humans. Of the 24, 13 were approved and 11 were rejected. So if we want to now quantify what is the benefit of this process, we can go ahead and use a standard labor rate to be able to represent that, and then it becomes some fairly simple math in order to go ahead and generate the sort of the outcome. So if we think about this as going to continue to run for every particular product return, this is automatically up to date, and this is something that you can now go ahead and share with your stakeholders. I think the other thing that's interesting here is you can now start to create trends. So what does this look like when you first start? Then what does it look like 3 months in? What does this look like 6 months in? What if you're finding that, hey, the AI isn't performing as well as I'd like to? Now you have some data to actually go back, do some tuning, and then be able to see the impact of those particular changes. And so I think this is it's a new tool, it's a new capability, it's in preview. Look for it to GA shortly in the near future. But whether you're using AI or not, I think business process stakeholders have an interest in this type of data, and without getting into a lot of the technical verbosity that typically comes along with that. All right, so I'll hand it back over to you, Divya.
It's you.
Yeah, and this was the sort of the manual view of this, and as you can see, when we built the business process in the tool, it looks quite similar to that. Oh, okay, so there's one other area. So this is another investment area for us. I alluded to this earlier, but this is definitely something worth checking out. So we've talked about like large language models and logic apps doing ingestion and retrieval. There's also other use cases where you have a large language model application, but you need access to real-time data. And that real-time data is not going to be inside of the large language model. So let's take an example of that invoice. Is my invoice paid yet? That's not going to be in the large language model yet. But the ability to go ahead and have that conversation with that application and then reach out to a real-time API, in this case a logic app, to go fetch that data becomes pretty interesting. And so we've got some first-party integration with both Azure OpenAI Assistants, which is now rebranded as Agents, and then we also have semantic kernel integration as well.
All right. So like we said in the beginning, Logic Apps is all about developer productivity, and templates are a great way to accelerate developer productivity. In Logic Apps, we have templates that are pre-built workflows to different business processes, as well as design patterns. And you can use these pre-built workflows as a way to, instead of starting from scratch, you can get a jump start on your development activities. You can find these templates for various scenarios. We talked a lot about AI capabilities today. You will find many templates here for document ingestion from different data sources to different types of vector stores. You will also find here templates for design patterns such as exception handling or in-sequence processing using service bus and so on. So templates in what I would recommend is a great way when you are starting on a new problem. Now, templates also are generally available, which we announced at Ignite itself. What we had up until now were single workflow templates, so you could do things like which could only be included into a single workflow. But now we have also released the support for what we are calling as accelerators. These are more end-to-end solutions and span across multiple workflows. So here the idea is that you might want to have a solution which does order processing, and that solution would have multiple workflows, and we are able to provide that. In this example, what you're seeing here is a resume matching example using Azure OpenAI and SQL. So this solution has two workflows, one for indexing of the resumes into SQL, and the other one with on how you can chat with that data and screen your candidates using that second application. So as you all are starting on your AI journey, or if you are even starting on your Logic Apps journey, we would highly recommend you to take a look at templates and always start from there to see if you already have something for your needs before spending time and starting on from scratch on your solutions. So with that, yeah.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend checking out the templates. It's one of those things where we talked about ingestion, we talked about retrieval, and you might not be sure, hey, how do I get started? Legitimately, within half hour, you will have ingestion and retrieval working. And so it's a great opportunity to on-ramp. So this is our last slide. Oftentimes we do get asked, hey, how do we stay up to date with what's going on with Logic Apps? We do have the Logic Apps Aviators community. And as part of that, we do have regular webinars, live webcasts, the third Thursday of the month. So aka.ms/LA Live, and we'd love to see you on those webinars. We usually do product roadmaps, demos, things like that. And then also our blog. Every new feature that we deploy hits our blog. So we've got aka.ms/AIS Tech Community, and that's another great way to keep up to date with the latest in Logic Apps and Azure Integration Services in general. So with that, thank you for attending our session, and enjoy the rest of Ignite.